Hi, I'm Matt. I think we've met now. All about me. Now, if I was rating my assemblies for the most part of my working in schools career, this would be my top trump card. I think I'd score reasonably high on fun at about a 78. Stories, they increasingly became more of my ministry, so about a 64. Stillness, until very recently, my assemblies were not still. They were anything but that. They were, like the teachers would often say, oh, we knew you were in school, because they could hear it from across the corridor, and silliness was a bit high. That was just me having a bit of fun. So I have done 13 years working for a local church, and through all that time I've been doing assemblies, lunch clubs, lessons, and general what do you want me to do. I'm here to help kind of activities for the schools. I put 10 plus schools because I think I always had 10 on the go, but there were some schools that were kind of, if you imagine I had a sort of like a catchment area of my own, there were some schools that were always on the periphery, and so I dropped some schools to pick up other schools in there, but I was often juggling assemblies in 10 schools, and in all of them doing collective worships, and in some of them doing lunch clubs, and then pretty much all of them, or in fact all of them at some point during my time there had things like Christmas experience or Easter experience or visits for RE lessons and things like that. So quite a lot of time in primary schools, but in recent years I've been doing lessons, including Cap Money, if you come across that, the Cap Money, both youth and kids. I've run in high schools, so that's taking a pre-written lesson and taking that in to help with money management. And I like to think that that I was a positive when I went into each of the schools, and that I had an impact, and I got a little fun story that I'd like to tell you, just because I thought it was amusing. So there was a school. There was a school in a town called Thetford that my friend used to teach at. She said, "Can you come and do an assemblies? Because I know that's what you do." But I went there for a couple of years, and after a while, I was like, you know, it's to do your school. It's about a 2-hour round trip for me, which I love doing. But my time pressures are quite high, and the town that you're in does not connect anyway naturally to where I do my work, so I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to step back and so I can redistribute my time and resources elsewhere. And in the process of that, I linked them with local churches, and had even done assemblies with kids workers from the local church, in a sort of a handover kind of style, so I didn't leave them in the lurch. Anyway, several years later, I now have children of my own, and one of those children is Benjamin. Benjamin at the time, I think, was probably about 4 years old, and had been invited to a birthday party in that town at the local sort of play centre, and we went along, and I don't often go to Thetford at all, so this was sort of like a little trip out there. At the same time, I've been in the church meeting during the week, where one of the sort of encouragements to do and then to come and feedback on was finding a way to naturally share faith with someone that you don't know. So I was out and about, and I had this thought in my mind when my wife texts me and says, "Can you go to Tesco's and get a few things, because we're going round to friends tonight and we don't want to go empty-handed." I'm like, "Brilliant, fine, yep, I can do that." So I go in, and I'm at the checkout, and it's around about lunchtime on a Saturday. Tesco's is always heaving at around that time on a Saturday, and bless the young girl who was there, she must have been somewhere between 16 and 18. Like, she was first job, and it was pretty hectic, and the person in front of me wasn't being particularly nice to her, and was obviously dealing with whatever they were dealing with that day, but taking it out on her. So when it came my time to pay, I was nice and gentle, and they just said, "No, just checking that. Are you okay?" So, "Yeah, no, I'll be fine." I was like, "Do you have a break coming up?" So I've just been on it. It's like, okay, I'm a Christian, and I believe that, like, prayer, no matter how long it is, can be something that just helps us during our day. It helps us in calm. So maybe just every 10 seconds, between each customer, take 10 seconds, deep breath. And you could do something called prayer, which in this just simply say, God, give me a peace that passes understanding. And that's pretty much all I said to her. And she looks up at me and says, are you Matt from Kids Club? Hadn't been in that town for years. Hadn't been in her school for years. And she'd obviously already, and I was only doing primary school assembly, so she's now gone all the way through high school. What makes that story quite fun is that earlier at the party, there was a face painting person, and me and Benjamin both had dinosaurs painted on our face, which was quite fun. So I'm like, did she know who I was because of the prayerful advice or the face paint? Okay, would you like just to chat across the rooms with yourself, or would you like to split into like pairs? What do you think would work best for you guys? Because there's going to be a bit of audience participation. What would you prefer to do, or shall I just make a decision because we're all looking at each other? Pair up, 2, 2, 2. Brilliant. Okay, so reflection. Let's start with a bit of reflection. Where is our ministry with schools at the moment? Are we waving, connected, embraced, or embedded? Waving, so you're not yet in the schools. So I've had experiences, obviously you can imagine if I'm juggling 10 schools at a time, I've been at all of them with various different schools. So waving, at one point I actually went and helped a friend's ministry who was in a local school that I was like, that's right on my patch and I want to be in there. So can I come and do a Christmas experience with you so I can meet the head teacher? That's me waving. I'm not in the school yet, but I'm waving through the musical fan. Waving through a window. I was listening to that soundtrack, that's probably why that was in my head. So that's one, waving. 2, are you connected? You're in the school, maybe regular, semi-regular, but you don't feel part of the fabric yet. For example, one school, they loved having me in. They always said it was so great having me in. They even said, oh, come in and do a lunch club. But they would always forget to tell me when the room wasn't able to be used. And so much so that one day they were like, oh, there is some building work going on, but they won't be working over lunchtime. That was until the drill came through the wall, and I was like, kids, let's go outside. Let's stop now. And there's that episode of Friends where Chandler drills through the wall. It was exactly like that. And I was like, no, this isn't right. We'll do it. So I'm connected, I'm in, but I am often getting forgotten about, and it's not where I want it to be. Embraced. You're in the school. You're welcome. You're being celebrated. Welcomed and celebrated. They like you there. Mutual requests are the norm. One of the schools, just for example, they're contacting you to say, can you come and do that? A school called Neptune, they would always be first in. I didn't do much else in there, but I would come in, but they would always say, Matt, we'd love to have you in. And when I said I was coming to do, I had 2 weeks in which I could do one final assembly, and whichever schools wanted one final one before I moved roles, they were ones that put their hands up and said, come and do that. So I was embraced by the school. Or are you embedded? Are you part of the furniture, or as much part of the school as any other member of staff? For example, one of the schools that I visited, I've been there for so long, that they were like, you just need to be a governor now. Can you we need people that have a heart for this school, love this school, and want to see what's best on our governors. Can you come and do that role? And I did, and then I couldn't anymore because I couldn't juggle the time commitments for that in my new role, which was a shame. But I'm hopefully able to pass it on to people in the community to do that better. So where are you at in either the school or schools that you're going into? Tell your partner a little bit. Go. Interesting, I'm sure. From what I heard is I definitely heard some people here. I even heard some people here. I'm not sure the people I didn't hear were somewhere in between as well. We're there. I'm just interest very quickly. What's your responsibility in your local church? Just views. Vicar. Youth leader. Discerning vicar. Discerning, did you say? Cool.
Diocesan officer.
I don't know. We all have different titles. Do you get to go to the thing in October?
What's the thing?
To CYF advisors?
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Then.
Yeah, one of them.
One of them. Brilliant. Awesome. That's really helpful to know. Okay. Brilliant. So, what I realised is that whilst I had schools that were spread over these different sections, and I had some that were in this 3 or 4, which was great. I had plenty that were here, and occasionally some of the ones from here slipped back into here, and took a lot of hard work, especially in and around lockdown. I did plenty of virtual Zoom assemblies and got pretty good at it, actually. I was like, I could just do one assembly and just stream it to everyone. That'd be brilliant. I'd save loads of time.
To the whole country.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, relationship would be down, but productivity would be up. That I didn't have the chance, though, to really step back and look at what I was doing and why I was doing it. And so nothing ever really changed in my practice over those 13 years. It was everyone gets a half-termly assembly because I can't do any more than that. The schools closest to me, or the ones that ask, might get a lunch club that I can facilitate. I won't do open the book unless it is for the church school in our village, because I don't like it and it doesn't reflect what I was doing in a club on a Saturday morning. And everything I did in a school, as we'll look at, was to point to the club that I was running on a Saturday morning. And that was where the relationship was to be built, not in the school, but in my club. And so therefore, everything I was doing was kind of pointing towards that one thing. And it's only been actually having the opportunity to really step back since taking on my new role and really reflect on the decade of work that I'm like, oh, what on earth was I doing? So what we're going to have in this little session is probably me talking to myself about, was there a different way to do it? And if so, then what can we learn from this little journey, and how can we apply that as we go back into our schools? So I want to tell you an unlikely story, and I call it an unlikely story because that's what the book's called. When I started my new job, my boss Jonathan said, read this book. And so, as I was in the middle of writing an essay, I put it in my bag, and it stayed there in my bag because I was writing an essay. And if I was reading anything, it was for the essay that I was writing, and I wasn't reading anything else at all. But but every month he would check in with me and be like, what are you, have you had a little bit more of a look at it? And he would drip feed little ideas from this story into our conversation. And in the end, whilst I was on holiday with my wife in a shepherd's hut in North Yorkshire, I picked it up and I started to read it. And I started to think, oh, what if I turned up in a school without an agenda? The story of the book is Kevin Plough, who, if you've come across Louis Plough, that's his son, but he worked for the Louis Powell Charity Foundation, taking the gospel in big, spectacular ways, especially in South America, but across the globe, for big, almost Billy Graham-style evangelistical events. But increasingly, he was sensing, well, this isn't having the same results that it used to, especially in America, especially in the town in Washington State, Oregon, where they come from, wasn't having the same impact that it used to have. And so they started thinking, why is there something different? And they tried something different, a bit more of a freer festivals type of thing, and that worked for a little while, and then it wasn't having quite the same effect. So they had this contact of thousands of Christians across their state, represented by hundreds of churches, and they had connections with the local church, and they thought, well, what if we, instead of using that connection to come together as a group to sing and to worship and invite our friends to, what instead if we went to the mayor and said, what do you need? What can we do? And so that's exactly what they did, and it worked so well that the mayor, who actually was a non-Christian, in fact very far from being a Christian, writes the foreword for the book because of how well the story went. But chapter 4 was all about their visits into a school, and this was a reflection from one of the school teachers that was impacted. They said there's no way a school can provide everything a child needs. So to know you have a partner and to have the kids know there is power in faithful service. There was this challenge of going in, not just to your town, but to the schools and saying, what is it that you need? And from that, we have lots of little stories of one church approaching a school and saying, this is the most rundown school. They didn't say that. It was the most rundown school. They approached and said, what do you need? And they turned up in their hundreds. In fact, I think if I click through, it was like 10,000 people came across the season to help. And they absolutely transformed this school in terms of the way it looked. But then when it was all clean, and when it had all been painted, and all the things that had broken had been fixed, and the school was about to start again, they asked the question, what else do you need? Oh, well, we've got lots of young people that struggle with anger. Okay, can we help mentor? And soon the relationship got so big that the church, the largest church that was involved, employed someone to actually be the liaison between the school and the church to ensure that all the volunteers were ready and able to be used and used for the right things. And then a couple of months into that, the school were like, well, actually, it makes more sense if you're just here. So they got her an office on site, and so she became a permanent presence in the school, and the church partnered with the school, but not on the church's terms, on the school's terms, and the schools embraced that partnership. Then they offered mentoring, they did sports coaching, like I think I heard, did you do rugby coaching?
Yeah, I'm a Welsh rugby union coach.
Awesome, awesome. That is one thing we don't have enough of in Norfolk, is rugby union specialists. The local church employed a schools coordinator, and the school gave them an office, and the school started to dramatically improve. These churches did the same thing. They just turned up and they said, what do you need? So I wonder what it would look like if we, as the church, just came to a school and said, what do you need? Because what I was finding was that in my 10 schools journey, that I had become extended. I was stretched thin. I wasn't able to offer a decent service because it was all based on me and what I could do, and I wasn't really embedded in the schools that I was in. I think maybe in a couple of the schools I could potentially say I was embedded, but for the most part I was a visitor, nothing more, because I'd stretched myself thin. Part of what I was doing was quite selfish, because I always had a vaguely ulterior motive. My reason to be in the school, I guess, was to advertise the clubs that I was doing, or the holiday club that I was doing, because for me, the child was going to be best served by coming to my club. And
school is best served the other way around, right?
Yeah. And how many children migrated as a percentage to my clubs? Well, very few. I came in with selfish motives and I wasn't serving them. And I've worked really hard to get the alliteration here. I was panting, I wasn't present. I was always dashing in and dashing out because my diary was so filled with assembly, club, meeting, go, get back for my children, go, that I was always panting in. I never had the chance maybe to chat with a staff member, or sometimes the children would already have arrived in the hall and I would dash in, do an assembly, look at my watch and dash back out because I had so much to do, which is the factor that comes in with us church. I was always dashing, often promoting, always on to the next thing. Was I truly giving these schools my best and therefore having a lasting impact? And then This was obviously getting quite late at night when I was writing some of these notes, and obviously I was getting a bit sentimental. I was like, how many realise I've even gone? Not that it's about me in the slightest, but in some ways I guess I've kind of made it about me. So, what's changed to allow me to start thinking and reflecting? Well, essentially, I've just come in my role and seen people practicing things differently, and had a chance to reflect on my own practice. In particular, the work of one of our colleagues in the diocese who heads up a Youth for Christ in sort of South Norfolk area, and from that centre runs a teen chaplaincy project. And this is from her MA dissertation that she wrote. We noticed the difference in the atmosphere when Claire is in the school. Essentially, their teen chaplaincy project kind of took that idea of turning up and being present in each school and being there and responding to the school's needs. They probably offered a bit more than the story of Unlikely suggests. They probably suggested things that they could do, but the essence is we're present and a presence in the school. When we're there, nothing else matters. And that looks a little bit different in our different places. It definitely looks different between high school and primary school. In one of our primary schools, one of our wonderful vicars literally writes off Friday. Friday, he is all day in that school. Sure, he does stuff at the end of the day as well when school's closed. But in Friday, he is there. He is there for the children. He's there for the staff. He takes collective worship that day. He does other things at other times as well. He will help out with RE lessons as required, but he is there. He's in the staff room. He's on the playground. He's there. In the high schools, they run lunch clubs that mirror some of the clubs that run during lunchtimes in other schools, so that there is a bit of continuity as children transition from one place to the other. But sometimes it's just at lunchtime, they're out in the playground, and people know that the chaplains are there for them if they need them. They are involved in school life. I think the chaplaincy model is presence over product. It offers bodies and time, and may offer specifics, but it also is just at the school's disposal. Team chaplaincy aims to bring the whole church ownership of school, not just the worker or the vicar. How much more impactful might my ministry have been if I had chosen to set up myself as a liaison to the different schools I visited, connecting them to either the local churches on the patches that I was going into, or our local volunteers who came from the surrounding area, and supporting those to impact their school instead of trying to do all things myself. As a church, prior to COVID, I think we had the potential in one of the schools to have that. We had mini assembly and clubbing. We had an open the book team that I oversaw but wasn't exclusively me. We had the church leader at the time meeting with the head teacher to offer pastoral support for them, and that could have extended to the wider staff. And we had a handful of governors from our church on the governing body, but none of it was joined up. It was all a bit haphazard, and the whole church did not pick up the mandate to support that school as a whole, even though it was the one just down the road from us. I wonder what would have been different. Well, what can happen if we do that? Well, one of the local schools involved in the teen chaplaincy in a town called Thetford, the local church had £500, and they just gave it to the church. Sorry, gave it to the school. They gave it to the school with no strings attached, just as an offering. We had this money that we didn't necessarily expect to have, or that we had set aside to give away, and we just want to give it to you. The school took it and very grateful, and then a couple of weeks later came back and said, do you mind if we use this money to create an outside prayer space? we thought that in the breakyard, it'd be nice just to use the money that the church has given for something that's about their faith. And they were like, yeah, of course. But that was the church really willing to hold their hands up to pass on a gift and see a school choose what to do with it. And the school recognised that and honoured that, but also will now embrace it more wholeheartedly because it's not something the church have done. Let's put in a prayer space for you. Oh no, actually our children would really benefit from a prayer space outside that looks like this. Just little stories that can impact. In fact, I've got more. That's for the next thing. I never really got a chance to do this. I'm sure you guys actually are more the experts than I am. But here are 3 little stories that just show what practicing presence could look like in schools and how it will, and show us it will look different when we are willing to give up control, when we're willing to not make it us focused but them focused. Jerry was a vicar who was placed in the church just one town over from where I was. I was already in all the schools on her parish patch, but she struggled to get in. And she came and chatted to me, and I was like, I'd love to help you. Come and help me on my kids' clubs that happen in the school. If you want, I've got a club you can come and join me at. And it took her a long time. She just, one school in particular, she could not get through the door. She was waving, and I was dragging. That wasn't one of the ones that was on there. But I was trying to help her in any way that I could because I saw the benefit of us both being in the school because I recognised I couldn't do everything, and the local church being in the local school is always a win. Until one day Jerry turned up at the school with a cake and just said, I've made a cake for the staff, here you go. I thought, oh, would you like to come and put it in the staff room? That started a weekly Jerry turning up with a cake. And she did do other things in the school, but actually her purpose in the school became one very different to anything that I could do. Once a week, she sat in the staff room, the vicar and the staff in the room, eating cake, chatting, and the amount of pastoral things that she was able to pick up from, I'm sure, had a massive impact on the school. And that all came because she was able to persevere, but she also offered something different, and it was all just actually she was willing just to leave the cake and walk away, but she was then invited in, and she became a long-term presence all the way until she retired in school. Steph, she's my boss's husband, she's the one that wrote the dissertation on the teen chaplaincy. She noted lots of interesting things because one of the questions that I'm looking at the wrong notes now. One of the questions I have for myself in that is, well, yes, this is really lovely that we can do that, but does it have a missional purpose to it? Is it just supporting a school and then seeing where things lie? Can I bring my faith into this? One of the things that she noted from her studies is that children were more likely to come along to the things that a school chaplain invited them to over their friends. That actually the school chaplain's presence and relationship in school had the ability that when there were things that were for young people that were beyond school time, that were in the church, that were maybe youth groups or Christmas activities, they were more willing to communicate with, were more willing to receive the invitation from the school chaplain, and it just shows you a little bit of the relationship. But also one of the things it was is that I didn't want to let her down, but it opened up a missional door by being a presence in that school. And interestingly, one of the other things that she noticed that volunteers were less well known than the lead chaplain and less embedded in the school, particularly in secondary schools. The language of chaplaincy really helped them embed in the school, really helped them become not just a presence in the school, but a part of the school, to where the head teacher was able to know how different it is when Claire came into their school. And Lee, his name is Lee Jackson. I came across him years ago when I was at university on the sort of UCCF Christian Union sort of talking circuit. He wrote a book, Effective Schools Work, which is a little bit dated, but his story isn't. And so I just want to read a little bit of that to you. While I was doing outreach, part of my discipleship training with youth with a mission, YWAM, in Northern Ireland back in 1993, I was put in charge of the Schools Work module. We had a whole series of lessons to do in school. We had an excellent week being involved in school life, and we met some great people there. Sari, my friend from YWAM, and I had just finished giving a lesson, and we left at the end of school with all the rest of the kids. We crossed the footbridge over the dual carriageway and started to make our way to our host's home when suddenly I heard a noise behind me and saw what I thought was a bag flying up above the bonnet of a car. Something happened inside of me, and suddenly I realised that this wasn't a bag, it was a person. I somehow got across the dual carriageway to the other side of the road and made my way to the scene of the accident without thinking twice. A young man of 18 was lying there in the road with blood coming from his head. I just stood over him and started praying. He was still alive and people gathered around until eventually a doctor stopped and then the ambulance arrived. I continued to pray for this young man while Sari spoke to and comforted the driver of the vehicle who was hysterical. The 18-year-old had been hit on the dual carriageway at 50 miles an hour. Apparently his friend had called out to him and he had turned round just for a second and hadn't seen the car that was coming straight for him. Being so close to an accident like that affected my life for several days afterwards, and I still remember it vividly now. I didn't know what I was doing or what I was praying about at the time. I suppose that is what they call standing in the gap. I found out a few days later, just before we left Northern Ireland, that he had died. Sari and I had to talk it through with some people before we could get our lives back to normal. It just happened that we had an assembly at school the next morning as a whole team. We decided to shelve what we planned, and I talked honestly from the heart about God and how important our relationship with him is. It was one of those times where God was present and we were able to pray for the family of this young man. Every young person in the school seemed to listen intently to what we had to say, as many of them had also witnessed the accident. After those 2 days, it felt as if I'd done 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. We were exhausted. It brought home to me that in my first experience of schools work, that what we do has eternal consequences. But it was also a privilege to be involved in the school at such a difficult and scary time. If the head teacher invites you to a presentation evening, school play or sixth form ball, then go ahead and celebrate with the school, but also let them know that you are around for the difficult times as well. One of the main things to educate children about is the fact that there are ups and downs in life the whole time, and that is part of the excitement and sadness of life, in and out of school. When I started as a schools worker, I never expected to go to the funeral of a young person in the school where I was working, but God has taught me so much through that experience, and it changed my school's work forever. Lee had no idea that that was going to happen. He was just going to serve a school, but when it did happen, he was perfectly placed to respond to it and to support the school. It's the idea that we may go into school for one reason, but when we're a presence in the school, we're there to journey with them through all seasons. We might go in as a rugby coach, we might go in to do a collective worship, we might go in to sit and eat cake with teachers. Jesus called me to that one. We might be called to go and sit and eat cake with staff. But I wonder what God knows is coming, that we're being placed in our local schools to serve them for.
I mean, we're going to remember as well when you're a coach and teaching life skills.
one of the stories in this book is about how an ex-NFL quarterback could have stayed in his son's school and been the coach there, but instead went to the school that and was just, I'll just be the offensive assistant and helped out. And he spent ages wondering why on earth he was there doing that, because he was so overqualified and could have done it all, could have just taken it up. But when there was a similar accident, he was perfectly placed to mentor those boys that lost. I think it was a teacher in this incident that had passed away. He didn't know that. He had just gone to be the coach or help out the coach, but was there when the tragedy happened in that case, just like Leah did. Yeah. And there'll be plenty as well that it's not as drastic as that. It's just the ups and downs. For me, my clubs did shift a lot over the year, especially with the older end. And in the end, I was there playing board games at lunchtimes and not trying to tell a Bible story, because around the table playing board games, those children just chatted, and sometimes we chatted about nonsense, and sometimes they told me how they were feeling, and a couple of things I fed back to the school if it was appropriate, and a couple of things I asked them about it the next week when I saw them. Oh, how was it when there was a mum who was about to have a baby. Has the baby come? How is he doing? Is everyone okay? And it meant a lot to that child. It's long term, it's not short term. Okay, and I think actually that's probably the key, isn't it? These relationships need to be owned by the churches that we represent, not by the individual, because that's the way they become long-term and transformational relationships. Actually, at the moment, most of the schools that I was juggling aren't yet having a regular visitor, because my replacement is getting up to speed and still finding their place and putting their priorities in place. And so I've just gone, because I hadn't built in enough structure to allow the church as a whole to own the school. But when we do that, we aim for long-term transformational relationships with the school, rather than all on my terms, all to get them as a bum on seat in my clubs, or even just I can offer you so much, but when I go it's gone, which also doesn't feel like the right thing to do. So we've got 10 minutes. We should do some chatting so we can reflect and get some things in. But I can then, if we have 5 minutes of chatting, and then we've got 5 minutes for anything I've missed and any practical questions you want to ask me about doing stuff, including the things that's on my list. I wonder if the school chaplaincy question is sort of, we've kind of covered a bit of that, but if we haven't, let's definitely carry on. So questions that we can go for. I think the simple one is, what can you give? What have you got that you can give the school? And maybe even thinking, because it might be a tricky one when you go to the school and say, what do you need? Maybe have some ideas of what, thinking ahead, what might a school need? And then that's appropriate. So, what could you give a school? What might a school need? In your pairs. Go.